Welcome back to We Move Through Stormy Weather, a Phish podcast by Storm Sound and Osiris Media. My name is Ryan Storm, and today I am joined by Benjy Eisen. Benjy is a writer, journalist, and artist manager based in California. He is the co-author of Deal, My 3 Decades of Drumming, Dreams, and Drugs with the Grateful Dead, a New York Times bestseller that he wrote with Bill Kreutzmann, the drummer for the legendary band. He's also interviewed and written about hundreds of musicians and celebrities, including everyone from the Rolling Stones to Ted Nugent, for publications such as Rolling Stone, Esquire, Men's Journal, and MTV News. He just wrapped up the 4th season of Undermine, Tom Marshall's Phish podcast that he writes, co-hosts, and co-produces alongside Tom Marshall and RJB, and he continues to work closely with Bill Kreutzmann on a number of current creative projects, including Billy and the Kids. Hi, Benjy. How are you?
Hi, Ryan. I am great. I'm so glad that we're finally doing this.
Me too. It's been another one of those episodes that there have been a few throughout the series where it's like, chasing each other via Twitter DMs for like 2 years, and then it's like, finally, we're here and we're talking about it, and I'm excited.
We're right on time.
Yes, exactly. We're right where we need to be.
That's right.
We're where we were meant to be.
That's right.
Well, before we dive into our song pick for today and our jams, which we've got 2 great versions to talk about, let's go into. Tell me a little bit about how you got into Phish, your background.
I got into Phish. I suppose the Grateful Dead really were the gateway drug, but then I got into Phish in the mid '90s, and it was the fall of '93. So I was a college kid. I just entered college, and I liked the Grateful Dead. I loved the Grateful Dead at the time, and still do, obviously. But I had seen them at that point a few times, and they would have been my favorite band. But I also had a lot of favorite bands. Nirvana was hot at the '93. All these other bands that I absolutely loved, and so I wouldn't have said I was a Deadhead. I would have just said that they changed my life when I saw them the first time, because I was like, you can do this with a concert.
Right. But when was your first Dead show?
91, June or July 91 at RFK Stadium. I forget the date now. I want to say July 16th, 91 or June 16th. Nice. But yeah, 91 at RFK Stadium, and changed my life. But then when I discovered Phish, I was in the dorms in college, and around a bong in my friend's dorm room, and he put on You Enjoy Myself. I know, to be fair, I had heard rumblings of Phish in boarding school, and I think I heard Picture of Nectar. I think I even had it, but it didn't do anything for me. Like, I heard
it didn't click. Yeah,
I heard Llama, and I think it was sold to me by a friend of mine that said they're kind of like the Red Hot Chili Peppers, but then I heard Llama, and I was like, oh, hippie Chili Peppers. I guess so. Okay,
I don't know if I've ever heard that comparison before. That's ridiculous.
Never. No, totally off base. But Llama was the first song, so I'm like, okay, like maybe there's something to that. But then suddenly, around this bong in a dorm room, like in the cliche, like, smoke circle, like from that '70s show, and my friend puts on You Enjoy Myself, and it was like the world stopped. I was like, what is this? And it just, it hit, it took me, and I, immediately, by the end of it, I was just like, okay, cool. I'll see. I have to borrow the CD. I'll see you guys later. I go back to my room.
Going down a rabbit hole.
And this is a true story that's funny. I've told it before, but it's funny because it's true. And that's that I was in my dorm that evening with the girl I was dating at the time, and we had started to, have sex, and I had Junta on, and it's Union Federal, and she,
quite the background.
She freaked out and hated it and told me to turn it off, and I was like, I can't do that. And she was like, turn it off.
Union Federal stays on.
Yeah, and I was like, I'm listening to it's amazing, and she's like, it's either me or that, and I was like, well, okay, we gotta pause because I gotta hear the rest of this. and I heard the rest of the album, and only one of those are still with me today. And so I
It's
chose right.
true,
Yeah, I chose right.
Union Federal is timeless.
Yeah, totally.
That's what we know. Never get distracted by a woman when you could be listening to Union
Well,
Federal.
and then I think by the time Sanity hit, she was just like, "That's it. I'm fucking out of here.
I'm leaving." That's quite the introduction to the band. And then how long after that was your first show?
Just a couple months. New Year's Eve '93, which
In
was
Worcester.
an incredible first show to have. It was also an unfair first show. I thought they did the aquarium stage at every show, and it was just it was just an incredible first show. But I remember leaving that night. The Dead changed my life when I saw them for the first time in terms of I had seen, I was a music head, so I had, concerts were my, what my world revolved around, especially at that age when, anything I could go to that was all ages and not just in the clubs over 21. And so it expanded my world. But then when I saw my first Phish show, I was just like, I was like, this is for me. This is where I belong. This is it, and suddenly nothing else, like other music just all fell by the wayside. It was like, wow, this is on such a different level,
Right.
So, and it was very much, the Dead were always a little bit before my time. They were like a relic that you're watching and you're like, it's amazing. But, by the time I started seeing them,
it was 90s Dead.
Yeah, it was 90s Dead, and so I could dive into the tapes, but it always felt like I was diving into, the past, and somebody else's thing, and being lucky to witness it, but with Phish, it was very much of like, this is what's happening in this moment, like at the end of that night, Trey said, well, it's been 10 years for us. And I remember thinking, where the fuck have I been for 10 years? And then suddenly it was like, oh, but that also means that like they're kind of just blowing up, and so it was cool to be there for the mid 90s to get to experience all that. December 95, I saw, I was seeing shows between finals. I was going to finals and then driving a few hours to see a show, and then
as you should.
Yeah, absolutely. But the idea that in hindsight, I knew in December 95, I have to see as many of these shows as possible, and I think I saw like 8 that month, so
it's a good month to see shows.
Yeah. Like, to this day, one of my favorites.
If you're gonna pick a month to go see a lot of Phish shows, hard to top December 95. Well,
summer 94, which is underrated, I think. So, maybe it's because that was the first summer that I was doing a lot of, that I was doing more. I did that one show, the New Year's show. I did a couple shows of that spring tour because they played Binghamton and they came right near where my school was. But in the summer, I took a week and a half, and I did like a week and a half of tour. And so maybe that I saw Big Birch, during that run, the Gamehenge at Great Woods, the Montreal and Ottawa, Canada shows, SPAC, their first time at SPAC, and then it ended at Sugarbush, so I think that was really, that's an underrated tour.
Yeah, there's a lot going on, and that's a great segue into our main topic today, because we are talking about some summer 94 stuff. We've got, you picked David Bowie. This is the first time on the podcast. It's episode 33, and I have not done Bowie yet. And it's also interesting because for the second episode in a row, I picked a 1.0 version, which I don't generally do. The original idea for this podcast when I started it 2.5 years ago was, I'm going to pick a 3.0 version. My guest is going to pick a 1.0 version, and we're going to argue about it. Because I generally think, modern Phish is better. But, as this podcast has kind of evolved, like, Bowie wasn't even on my original list of songs because I was like, there is not a single version played after 2003 that can, top a version played before that. So I'm not even going to put it on the list. But, especially over the last year or so, I've been like, okay, like I can pick a 1.0 version, like, whatever. And so I picked the Island Tour stash in the last episode.
Great.
And then here I am today picking another phenomenal 1.0 version.
Yeah, the version you picked is phenomenal. Ryan, so I'm so glad to hear you say that about the modern era of Phish. I think that Phish, is as good a band as they've ever been. And when they have,
I'm gonna reach through the computer right now and shake your
yeah,
hand because I don't normally hear that from someone who's been seeing them
yeah,
for
no,
30 years.
I mean, it's a part of it is that what Phish taught me. One of the many lessons they taught me is you can't get stuck in yesterday, and you have to be
Right.
very much in the moment. And the moment's different. Like they're a different band. But that just means evolved. And I think that
Yeah.
when they're at their best now, they're at their best that they've ever been.
Yeah.
I think the things that one of the difficulties when people don't see that is because they're at an age where they can't be their best every moment. And in 94, 95, you left those shows going, that was the best night of it. Like every night it felt like they were just getting better and better and better.
Right, because they're also in 1994. They were playing with the speed and like at least physical ability of guys in their early 30s.
That's right.
Right now, they're like Page turned 60 a couple of days ago.
Yeah, and because of that, they're compensating for that with these amazing textures and whatever. But it works. It's and I'm getting older too, and so it's like, okay, cool. We can slow
Right.
down a little bit. It's fine. It's still frenetic. It's still a lot of notes. I had
Well, and also Phish in 1994 could not play any of the deep jams that Phish played.
that's
Say,
right.
for instance, like on this past spring tour,
Yeah.
like they didn't have the improv ability to do that, and
That's right.
they need, first of all, the wisdom and we can't play as fast, so we're going to step back and do other shit. They need the time to learn how to get to that point, which is, yeah, it's exactly.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And so I'm a huge fan of people ask me what Phish am I listening to, and it's always the most recent Phish.
Yeah.
It's I want to hear the spring tour because that's new and fresh. And I'm one of these guys that I don't believe. It's something that Phish taught was that like you don't want to be redundant, and I don't want to listen to the same show again. And when I go see Phish, I don't want to see the same set list that I saw in '94. That was great. That was incredible. I'm so glad that I saw it. But now, give me something new. Give me a new song. Give me something. Try doing something that I haven't seen yet.
Yeah.
And when it's those songs like I get why Tweezer is always a new song, right? Like when they do it right, it's gonna be a new song. But
Yeah.
Gayudi, for instance, I don't need to see another Gayudi. I want to see bring forward people to life on stage.
That's a hot take right there. Wow.
I want to see something new because that's what they're excited about, and also I haven't I've seen Gayudi a lot. It's great, but like
Right.
show me something new.
I see. I personally would like to see Gayudi if Trey's practiced it.
Yeah,
Um,
Well, that was the
like
problem.
because
That was even back when they in the '90s. That was
I
always
mean
the
it's an
problem with Gayudi.
incredibly difficult song.
Yeah,
Like it might be the most difficult one in the catalog.
yeah.
I feel like also Foam might be like
Oh, very
there are
difficult.
so many incredibly complex songs in the catalog that it's like how do you ever, first of all, like at the speeds that they used to play it at and playing all the right notes, like that shouldn't be possible.
Yeah, that's
But your point about the Dead and you getting into the Dead in the early 90s and then it's like, oh, it felt like someone else's thing. To me, that's why I feel like I've been so lucky with Phish because I'm a generation after the Phish heyday, right? Like I wasn't born until a month after 1.0 ended. So I'm so lucky and grateful that the band has been reinventing themselves and continuing to push the boundaries for the last 11 years that I've been seeing them.
Yeah.
Because I listen to and love shows from the 90s all the time, but being able to go to a show and witness stuff like just to think like last year's April MSG run, like the Whales and
that's great.
the jams that they played at that run, or like Chula Vista 2021, like that show is the best concert I've ever seen.
Yeah.
I walked out of that night like after that Piper being like, what the fuck?
Yep, that's right.
Unbelievable.
It's nights like that Chula Vista show, which I also was at, and I was at with my closest friends are most of them saw Phish at the earliest they saw Phish was 2.0. Most of them
Yeah.
saw them in 3.0. They're all about 10 years younger, 8 to 10 years younger than me, and they got into Phish later. And they used to, in the middle of 3.0, a few years into it, it would, and they were new to it in terms of they probably had seen 20 shows or less at that point, and they kept
I've only seen 18.
yeah, they kept on asking me. They're like, well, what was it like? What was it like? And I remember at one point, it might have even been Chula Vista where I walked out. I was like, you guys are asking about leaving the best shows of Phish. Well, now you just experienced
Yeah,
it.
like your people 15 years from now will be like, you were at fall 2021.
Yeah, that's right. It feels just as special now as it felt then. The only difference was that everybody was younger then, and the scene was younger, and there was a different element to the some of the adjacent things. Like there's a different element,
and you also couldn't listen to the whole show,
and you couldn't listen to the whole show afterwards. Yeah, it's a much better era like that. I mean, you walked out of a show, and I remember getting phone calls from friends on the road that they would have
what did they play?
Yeah, they'd have to tell me what they played and how it was, and I'd be like, "Do I get the tape?" Well, definitely get the second set.
Right.
And then like a month later, if you're lucky. And so
that's good. We got into a nice little tangent early on in the episode. I feel like that doesn't usually happen until later on, so that's good. I want to dive into these Bowies a little bit. You picked 6/18/94. Tell me about why you picked this verse.
Well, this is a great segue from what we were just talking about. I read on Rec Music Phish, I think it may have been Charlie Dirksen, I might be making that up, but a lot of people were praising this show on Rec Music Phish right after it happened. And I did a lot of that June 94 stuff, but it was after the Bowie that we're talking about came from the UIC Pavilion in Chicago. And then they did, after that, there's the SIDS 22 show, and just a number of amazing shows. But then come July, that's when I really hopped on. It was in July. And and so I was seeing shows on the road before I was able to hear this, and this is one of the shows that the UIC Pavilion and Columbus, SIDS 22 were the two that everybody was raving about, but I couldn't hear him. And so this Bowie, it took me a long time to get this set. And it would have been, my guess is it would have been sometime deep in the fall of 94 when I finally got the cassette, and I only got the second set. And I remember putting it on, and I walked around in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, where I was living at the time. I walked around City Island listening to it on headphones with a Walkman. And I just remember, freaking out, being, as soon as Peaches starts, it's just like, you know how there are those shows where the minute that they start, there's something in it.
It's on.
There's something in it. It's about like some extra mustard, where they're just putting it into, and this show starts off like, from the very first, bar of music that this is going to be one of those nights. And I remember walking around Sea Island like that. And, then another time I came back to this tape, I was breaking up with somebody, and I had a lot of heartbreak and a lot of pain over it. And my friend Carla, who I've seen a lot of shows with, said, therapeutically, listen to more Phish. It will do, like that's what you need. It will help. And I kind of thought she was being dismissive, but then sure enough, I put on this set of Phish and this Bowie. It was one of those moments where it's like, okay, nothing else matters. Nothing hurts. Everything's perfect.
Everything was beautiful and nothing hurts.
Everything is beautiful and nothing hurts. That's right.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think so. These two Bowies are interesting for me in terms of my Phish progression. I'll talk about my pick in a little bit, which is like actually very significant to my Phish listening journey. But this one, I think I first heard this sometime like late in grade 12 when I was still like, that was when I was just starting to listen to 1.0 Phish. Like I didn't hear a note purposely of 1.0 Phish until I listened to the Island Tour when I was like 17. Like I had only been listening to the handful of shows that I had downloaded on my phone. Like it was like Super Bowl, and then the shows that I had been to, and then a select few of other stuff, and some other jams that I would go to. but basically I was only like in when I was in grade 12 in 2017, 2018, I was pretty much only listening to like probably 10 shows, like, and that was all I was listening to. Like, I didn't listen to any other music. Now I listen to a wide variety of shows from 3 bands. But you know, it more than that. But
Well,
this Bowie, I remember hearing, and I like was not familiar with the sound of 1994 at the time. Like and just kind of being blown away by the turn on the dime, the speed, and it's just foot to the floor for 18 minutes. There's no give, there's no let up in this jam. It's just foot to the floor. And I mean, I love the Mind Left Body jam at the beginning. I love how you have just short of 30 seconds of Bowie intro, and then Trey just comes in with it, and then it's just like this soaring, Mind Left Body thing, and they all transition away from the Bowie intro. It's not like a jam over top of the hi-hat thing. It's just amazing for like 2.5 minutes, whatever.
Well, I think it's like a full 5 minutes before they go into the actual Bowie intro, and so in your mind, you kind of, if you're listening actively and you're in the moment with them, everyone forgets that it's David Bowie. The band probably forgot. They do this body thing, and it's so it really shows how Phish's strength of rallying around each other and passing the hay and the Ochipa, all these listening experiments and exercises that they do, because they kind of do this Mind Left Body jam, and on another night it may have just been that. It may have just been that descending little lick and then right back into the hi-hat. But instead, the whole band immediately just picks up on it, and they're like, off we go. Where are we going? Who knows? And then 5 minutes later, they're like, weren't we in David Bowie?
Yeah, there was a Bowie here at one point. Yeah, and there's one time right before they drop into the song, like 4.5-ish minutes in, where they kind of get into this like low, like dun dun space that reminded me of the Simple Jam from 8/12/98, which like the Vernon Downs show. There was something about it that like triggered that in my head, which is a super nerdy thing of me to do, but like it's just cool how you can hear, obviously they were a completely different band 4 years later when they played that jam, and that exact same kind of motif sounds so different in that Simple, but it sounds it sounds very similar, and I thought that was a cool thing to notice.
I think that in the Bowie that you picked, and I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but one of the things I love about these back to back is that there's also a little bit of an intro jam, and it shows you how different that intro can be, because the intro is it's a wide open palette. It's like they can do whatever they want with it, and now they often don't do anything. Now it's the hi-hat, and then they go into Bowie.
They go in, 20 seconds, whatever.
In 94, especially, for Bowie, in my opinion, I'm sure that, it's an opinion, so there can be healthy debate on it. But I think 93, 94, and 95 was when Bowie really came into itself. And there's a stretch of fall 94 Bowies before the Providence Bowie, where
Yep.
it was just, every time they played it, it was basically the tweezer that tweezer is now. It
Yeah.
was like, and tweezers were still tweezers, but when they did David Bowie,
Different.
yeah, different. But when they did David Bowie, then it was, to me, I mean, it was my favorite at the time, and now tweezer's my favorite for the same reasons. It's when they started
Right.
with David Bowie in the mid '90s. You knew that you were on a journey, and you had no idea. You knew where it would end, but you had no idea how it was going to get there. And now
Yeah.
when they do Bowie's, and probably the reason it didn't occur to you to have it, as part of this, is when they do Bowie's now, it reminds me of Slave or a Hood or even a Caspian, where like
Right.
it's this beautiful song, but it has
Structure.
yeah,
It's going to be 10, 11 minutes. It's going to close the set. It's going to be great, but you're not going to get anything
yeah,
crazy.
you know the playbook, and you know how they're gonna do it, and at any point too, if you stopped it and if you play 30 seconds of it out of context, you're like, oh, that's David Bowie.
It's Bowie. Yeah.
Whereas
Here you play this. There's a part of this 6/18/94 jam where they're basically playing a simple jam.
Yep.
And then you've got just teases galore, like 3 blind mice, and there's one part just before the 12-minute mark where Trey feels like he's building into the Arrival section of Fluffhead. Like,
That's
he's
right.
playing that final like it was like kind of similar to that. Dave's Energy Guide, Jimi Hendrix, like it's all over the map. And also, at the end, like at the very end of the jam, Trey does noises that sound like a fighter jet landing.
That's right. Yeah, totally.
It's so wild what they pack into 18 minutes here. And then you also wonder, like, 6 months later, they're playing multiple 40-minute versions of this song.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's absurd. Like, this song, it was the tweezer of 1994 because it fit their sound so well at the time. That tension, that turn on the dime, the speed, that's what Bowie is.
Yeah.
Right? That's the essence of Bowie, and that was the essence of Phish in 1994.
That's right. And I do wonder if maybe the reason they don't do it now is because there's a freneticism involved with it that that is hard for them to attain now. So instead they do something that's more suited to their, and tweezer's malleable. Tweezer, you can do that. You can look at the Shoreline tweezer that is, so incredible.
But I love that one.
Yeah. And Alpharetta from that same summer. I mean, there's a number of great tweezers, the recent one in Berkeley. But, they're also different. Whereas with Bowie, granted, I mean, even the Providence Bowie that we've mentioned, it gets very dark and spacey and spacious.
Yep.
But, I mean, we talked about the intro here and how they did other things. There's other Bowies from the same era where they do like a Jessica jam from the Allman Brothers. They do, Moby Dick. There's a Catapult, and they'll do Catapult Bowie, Bowie, stuff like that.
Right.
And Bowie was kind of the place for it. You knew that there was a time '93 where you kind of got the feeling that they probably were going to tease songs in that Bowie. Sometimes, sometimes songs from that same set are previewing songs that they're about to play or that they just played, and then other times, there's a Jessica lick, or
right. It's like, just for shits, we're gonna play, again. We're going to play a 3 Blind Mice jam.
Yeah.
Huh?
Totally. And not only that, but the 3 Blind Mice jam, the thing I love about it is first they hit that melody and then they all go with it. And then Trey just decides he's going to tape the 3 Blind Mice and he's going to fly. Like he's just doing
right.
And it's just like these soaring lead guitar lines from Trey that becomes the motif for the song. Like he comes back to it. And it's just this, this incredible, this beautiful melody that just soars with the band supporting him beneath it. And it's just, it's incredible. It really is. It's incredible.
It's fascinating to listen to them do this.
Well, the other,
it really is.
It is. The other thing too, that keeps coming to mind with this one, as you mentioned at the end, there's, what I love about Bowie's from this era is that the end of it, oftentimes the Bowie that I originally thought about, actually, Ryan, and this, was going to be Philadelphia, the Mann Music Center from '95, which is a criminally underrated Bowie. It's over 20 minutes. It was recently released as on a Live Bait compilation, and maybe from a year ago. I forget, but I was so glad to have the official version because it's incredible now that you can listen to the one that got the official, treatment and
Yeah.
that high quality sound. But at the end of these Bowies from this era, they would play with that dynamic of, okay, here we have this intensity, and then all of a sudden, boom, and we're going to very quickly, be on the opposite end of the spectrum and alternate between high intensity and low intensity. And here, during that low intensity, Trey it's like almost like he can't stop. Like it's just like, oh, now it's Voodoo Child, now it's Purple Haze.
Yeah.
He
Well,
just
and it's not like some teases where he like kind of stumbles upon the lick in the middle of a jam. It's like during the breaks at the end of the song, he's like, I'm gonna do, Voodoo Child
yeah,
in this break, and then the next break, I'm gonna do Purple Haze.
and it's almost like his fingers just couldn't stop. Like the
Yeah.
band goes into that space, and rather than him going with it, he's just like, I gotta keep going. I just
Yeah.
his notes are just like coming out of him, and that's true with the other Bowie too. The Bowie you chose with both of these, Trey just has notes falling out of him.
Yeah. It's
Cascading,
incredible. And
cascading.
so, I mean, we keep alluding to it. Let's talk about my pick a little bit.
Yeah.
This is 73097 from Ventura. So this was, I believe, the very first 1.0 jam that I listened to ever.
Wow.
It was when I was in high school, I used to I would end up on this like online. I think it was, I forget what the website was called. It was like a listen together website where it was like a Phish station and people would suggest jams or whatever. And this was like early-ish when I was in grade 11. I hadn't really heard any 1.0 at all consciously. And then these people were like, okay, like, you've never heard this shit? Like, okay. And then they played this. And I was like, oh, like,
Yeah.
okay, now we're talking. Like, this is the kind of shit that I should be listening to. Now, like, obviously, I still prefer modern Phish, but that doesn't make this any less amazing. And it's so cool to compare the intros of the two of these jams
Right.
because, as I said before, it's like foot to the gas from the first second of 6/18/94. The 7/30/97 intro, it's still almost 5 minutes before they get into Bowie, but it's just like serene soundscapes. You get some vacuum, of course, because all classy jams have some vacuum in them. But just the like Page layering the CS60 synth on, Trey hanging back more, Mike like just like like neck deep in reverb
Yeah.
on the intro here. And of course, shout out to Matt Groening, who was at the show, Simpsons tease.
Oh,
But man, this intro is so cool. I
it,
love listening to
it's
it.
so cool, and it shows you that these two Bowies back to back are so great to hear back to back, because it really does show you how Bowie was the tweezer of the mid-90s, because they're
Right.
so both of these are so impressive, and they're also so different. When you picked out this Ventura one, I went to listen to it, and I hadn't listened to it for years. And
Yeah.
I love the show. I obviously have the official release. I've heard it many times, but it had been a long time since I heard it. And I put it on as I was going to bed, and it was stopping my tracks. Like, it was almost like the first time hearing any Phish at all. I was just like, holy shit, what are
Yeah.
and it's so good. And it also is just so, there's elements of this that are very much 97, but there's also element, summer 97 especially. But
Yes.
there are, and they hint a little bit at the fall of 97, like in that segue that right before the segue into cities. But there's stuff where Trey's doing they're like on, like they're doing the reggae upbeat upbeat upstroke, and they set it up where it's just, and then Trey starts again, just ideas flowing out of him. And I love
Right.
how these two Bowies are, they're so different, and yet at the same time they have that same spirit of adventure.
Yeah. And it's a good point you mentioned about summer 97 versus fall 97. And I know through Undermine recently, you have done a deep dive on every single fall 97 show, plus, a lot of contextual listening. But yeah, I prefer summer '97 to fall '97 personally. I've always kind of felt that way. It's a brighter sound. It feels fresher. They're just discovering that. It feels more experimental too, right? Fall '97 is darker, and I think, to me, I envision it as like it's winter and we're in arenas, and it's a darker sound. And then summer, it's like we're outside in these sheds. We're having a ball. We're discovering this funk sound. And I talked about this recently. I forget where I was talking about this, but it's like it's brighter. It's more experimental. I feel like I'm repeating myself now, but it's there's a certain something that you lose in between the summer and the fall, which is part of what gives fall its unique sound. And it's like they're like, we're in the funk. We're gonna do this in every single jam. It's gonna be funk, Trey shredding, funk, etc. Summer, you have this bouncier, more playful energy to it, in my mind, and that really comes across early on in this jam, where you have that first kind of minute where it's like, where are we going with this? You can tell they're all kind of throwing some ideas. They're trying out different things, and then Fishman starts into that reggae feeling thing. Page catches on, and then we're off to the races, right? And that's the hallmark of this jam to me. It's that first moment, where they make that shift. It's like the Ventura Bowie is that's when it becomes the Ventura Bowie.
I completely agree, and I'm so glad this is my turn to go through the screen to shake your hand. I'm so glad you said that about '97. I mean, I think, to me, fall '97 is very interesting, and it's worthy of examination, as we did on Undermine. But it is, dare I say it, but it's true. I think it's overrated.
Yes.
I think that it's worthy of examination because it's different, and it's back then in the '90s. I think every tour had a hallmark to it. More so than now. There's summer '95 was ambient space, and summer '98 was like the jukebox where they were doing a different cover every night. And there are these hallmarks of every tour that they almost consciously were like, we're going to focus on this. And fall '97 was the James Brown thing. They had the tape on the bus, and they were trying to do that and integrate that into their sound. And also they were trying to make entire arenas full of people dance, because in '96, which gets a bad rep, but there were great shows there. But it was like they were taking their prog rock stuff to arenas, and '97 is where they figured out, well, people want to dance, and we can make them dance hard, like to funk. But they lost something about. They lost that, like that peak jamming, and that the apex, and the Bowie that we just talked about, from Chicago. It lost that, like the nuances that they went off with that got lost to this idea that we need to have a funk beat. We need to keep people dancing.
Right.
And I feel like summer '97, they're inching towards that, but they are outside, like you said. Somebody else, as a quick tangent, somebody sent me a message when we were
I love
Undermine, and somebody who had been to every one of a friend of mine who had been to every one of those fall shows, and he said, something that gets lost unless you were there, and that needs to be spoken about, is that the music was getting darker as the tour is progressing, and the weather was getting worse, and it was in between. It was snowstorms, and it was unusually freezing cold outside. Like the temperatures were lower than typical. It was snowstorm after snowstorm, and outside, fans were huddling out and then warming up in the building. And so the music really actually did reflect that, in some way, and internalize that in those jams.
Yeah. Well, you take a jam, for example, like the Virginia Beach Gin or the Lakewood Ghost, and there's that playful energy to it. The Lakewood Ghost is
So
in my
good.
top 5
Yeah,
favorite
so
Phish jams
good.
of all time.
Yes,
Anybody who says Denver is better is wrong,
wrong. I agree.
because it's not close.
100% agree with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can hear like Trey's like whooping throughout that entire jam. There's just like that. They're like, unbounded, like fuck it. Like, we're going to play this Ghost for 27 minutes. This is going to be awesome. And then the On Your Way Down shit
Yep.
in the second half is so good.
It was the culmination of a weekend too, where they came back
Yeah.
from Europe and they debuted the songs in Virginia Beach.
Those 3 shows are ridiculous.
Yep. And then they go to Walnut Creek, and then all of a sudden the Atlanta was kind of like the exclamation mark on that weekend, and
Right.
But that Ghost, I agree with you. That Ghost is untouchable.
Yeah. And so it's that playful energy to me, which again, you hear in this Bowie too. It's like, the bounciness, even the funk section later on in the jam, it has a bounciness.
Yeah.
The fall jams don't have that bounciness.
No, that's right. And they don't have the bounciness, and they also don't have.
That's the main distinction, I think.
That's right. I think so too. And that reggae section we started talking about, where the band's all working together to figure out where they're going, and then Trey just starts riffing on top, and it's like, it turns into what could be a Slave or a Hood, where it's building like that. But then as it all starts building, it's like they're working for a brighter tomorrow today, and then like
right.
12 minutes into it, I think it was around 12 minutes. It's the stuff that's the closest to my Phish heart, and that's where it's just, they have so many folds of their musical personality, but I think my favorite is the style of apex jamming, this peak jamming, where the notes are just cascading and building and building and building, and you literally
it's the Bowie snowball, like rolling down a hill and getting bigger and bigger and faster, and like it feels like at that 12-minute mark, like, oh, this might just be a pretty, quote unquote standard, because it's amazing, but it's Bowie, it's going to be 15 minutes, it's going to be amazing, but not going to do anything crazy. And then there's that shift just before 18 minutes where it's like, all right, we're going, elsewhere. Like, they're flirting with it for a couple of minutes before that, but then Trey starts doing like the wah scratchy thing.
Yep.
That's when they really depart into that second big funk section, and then eventually the cities. But
right before we get to the cities, going back to that 12-minute part, but one of the things I love about it that stands out to me is that as Trey is shredding, like straight up shredding, right? But rather than, I think other bands, if they had a guitar player like that, they would be kind of vamping underneath, and just trying to support. Whereas Page isn't
so
playing.
active.
Yeah, Page is not playing pads. He's not just playing like pads and supporting and emoting. He is just as frenetic with him. He's pounding the keys like a madman. And there's this illusion, like they're kind of doing embroidery, and they're creating this like tapestry of sound, but there's this illusion of increasing speed. Like you feel like it's all just barreling forward.
Yeah.
It's not. It's kind of an illusion. It's what you're hearing is accelerating is the intensity. The intensity is accelerating. And that's kind of, it's the midpoint of this torture. It's not the peak, as you said. We still have a ways to go, but it's just that to me was like the moment where you're just like, what is happening here?
Right.
And you're on board, and you're just like, you have to have your seatbelt on, your helmet, secured.
Well, and comparing that to the kind of Runaway Freight Train shit in the 94 version, it's same, but also so different. That's again, right. Because Phish constantly evolving, playing the same kind of jam feels so different. First of all, I haven't mentioned it yet. Summer 97 Trey guitar tone is my favorite Trey guitar tone.
Awesome. Yeah.
It's buttery, it's smooth, it's bright. It does everything it needs to do, and it's just so uniquely Trey. When I think of Trey's tone, I think of that.
I love it. Me too. When I think of Trey's tone, I think of that. I also, and I was thinking this just the other day when I was re-listening to these, that 94 tone, the Three Blind Mice jam that he does, that after the melody of that, when Trey comes up with his own riffing on that. That also is a classic Trey tone that I absolutely
Yeah.
love. The 94 tone and the summer 97, those are the, I mean, I don't get me wrong, I love his tone now as well.
Oh, it's great. Yeah.
And he's really perfected it. But that to me was like no other guitar player sounded at all like that. You have Trey played one note and you listened.
It's Trey.
Yeah, exactly
Yeah.
right. If someone gave you headphones and he already plucked it and now he's just holding it out and you put it on your headphones, you go, that's Trey Anastasio.
Yeah. You know who it is.
Yeah,
It's so distinct.
yeah,
Yeah, it's so cool. And I mean, this whole segment from Ventura, like the cities and then back into Bowie, like just the way they execute the segue. This is also, they play cities much closer to the Talking Heads pace than they normally do here. And just the way that they so smoothly they like modulate into the correct key for cities, and then coming out of cities, the way they modulate back into Bowie is so like it's so clean, and it's like it was just like a glance
yeah,
from Trey.
right.
Like there wasn't like a like a okay, and like
That's right. And in the beginning of it, I mean, the segue out of it is just as good as the segue into it, if not even better, because it's so
yeah,
smooth. You don't notice it at first. You're just like, oh, like you have to,
they're picking up
yeah,
speed.
you have to be paying attention, or else if it's background, you wouldn't know it until you do, until the telltale signs. But going into it, it's there's also a point where on the soundboard on the official recording, you can hear Trey yell out to Page, like we're gonna actually sing. Like in my mind, that all Trey says is Page, but when he says that, in my mind, it's him going, "We're actually gonna, like, we're not just gonna play it. We're actually gonna, let's sing it. Like, let's do it."
Yeah, we're doing the whole
Yeah,
thing.
we're gonna
Yeah,
do it. Because it's so smooth. I mean, that's one of those. It's one of the classic Phish segues. I think. Like, it's incredible.
100%. Well, it's a legendary segment of music. Both of these are from shows that have gotten official archival releases for reasons like these jams, and the fact that they exist in shows that are so amazing and also so well exemplify the eras that they're in.
Yeah.
If you're picking a summer 97 show, I feel like there are very few that are better, like just to demonstrate the era and the sound of that time. Like 730-97 does that so well because you have, first of all, you have this huge jamming centerpiece in this Bowie Cities Bowie. You have really well played, you have like a great stash. You got Chalk Dust in the first set, Character Zero, Cars, Trucks, Buses, like just regular songs. And then you've got also a display of the new funk sound in in a more contained environment, in like Free and in Wolfman's, stuff like that. So I feel like that this show, and also you have a My Soul encore, which everyone loves and no one will ever complain about. So it's just like it's a really emblematic show of the era, and 6/18/94 is too. Legendary, known, Divided Skies, like that one resonated with Trey specifically, and just like 1994 Phish.
Yeah, and after that Bowie, there was Stella Tweezer and You Enjoy Myself in that set.
Right, exactly.
Unbelievable. And for Ventura, yeah, there's a finesse to it. There's just this like finesse and grace in the intensity as it
Yeah.
builds and builds and builds after the cities when it's going back into it, where it's just like you can't. I don't think it's possible to even get that intense. To get more intense than that. I don't think it's. I think that they did it.
Agreed. Yeah.
They went as far as they can possibly take it with finesse and with grace. Because at the end of it, you want to rip off your shirt. I mean, please don't, but you want to like get naked and just be like, there's like it's that intense. It's a holy shit, dude, what just happened moment.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. It's truly unbelievable. Listening to these two jams, and I kind of hadn't thought about Bowie as being the mid '90s Tweezer that much before today, and now that kind of like now I'm cooling on my wanting them to jam it out again a little bit, because it's like, yeah, like, does jamming out Bowie fit 2023 Phish? Not really.
No, but there's moments where there are moments in some Bowies where, I mean, there are some Bowies where they get really spacey and ambient, and the whole reason it's the mid '90s tweezer is because it's full of endless possibilities,
Yeah.
and there's no, back then there is no distinct, the only expectation after I call it the cliff, like when they fall off the cliff after they composed, and after they do David
Yeah.
Bowie and UB40, and then there's this cliff, and then after the cliff anything is possible, and now we kind of know the script they're going to do, but still anything is possible. And then at that moment anything's possible except that where the ending is. You know that they're going to go back into that ending and have it be a bookmark, but in the middle it's like Gravity's Rainbow, where the rocket takes off and it can do any number of trajectories based on elemental things. If trade is one thing or if page is another, and then where the rocket's going to land.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable. And I think that's a great spot to wrap up our discussion here of these Bowies. I feel like we just did a very Bowie podcast. I feel like we started and then we just didn't stop for 45 minutes.
The cult of David Bowie.
Yeah, foot to the floor, talking about Phish very aggressively, which I love to do. I haven't done one of these like big jam deep dive pods in a couple of months, and I've been podcasting about Goose so much, so it's nice to get back into this and talk about Phish a while. Anyone listening at this point too, I'm going to tease the next episode is going to be another very special deep dive into the top jams of a year. We will be tackling 2018. We will have good friends of the pod, Brian Brinkman and Justin Bruce, coming back for that episode for another jam of the year spiel. It's probably going to be like 3 hours. We're recording it in a few days. I'm very excited because 2018 is one of my favorite years of Phish. That's going to be fun.
And Brian Brinkman, he's an he has an encyclopedic knowledge of.
He is.
And he's one of those guys where if he'll tell me a date and I'll have to look it up, and then I'll be like, oh yeah, I was there. But like he just knows off the top of his head without any refresh all the dates, and like he'll be able to tell you off the top of his head about August 13th, 93, where the jam was this many minutes long. Whereas me, like I know that jam, but I have to look up like the data sets about it.
Right. No, he knows it all. I love
that, another thing I love about him, just like with you and I hope with me, is that it's context too. Like he's really good, as are you, at being able to put it's not just dude that was cool, or like dude when they did. It's also being able to put it in context of the larger Phish narrative, and also put it in context of music at large, and say this is what's going on here. This is why I like it so much. This is why it's cool. This is why it works. And this is how it relates to Phish's, what they're doing that month, what they're doing that year, and what they've done as a band.
Yeah, it's awesome. I love doing that.
Yeah, it's great.
Contextualizing Phish is a lot of fun. Being a huge nerd.
So we're going to podcast, you and me and Brian, contextualize Phish.
Perfect. Oh yeah, that's great. The sequel to Analyze Phish.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Well, thank you so much, Benjy, for being on today. This has been an absolute pleasure. I look forward to meeting you in real life at a show soon, and getting to talk Phish more, because this has been awesome.
Yeah, I'll talk Phish with you anytime, Ryan. Also,
perfect.
And also we can get our toes wet with Goose, but let's stick mostly to Phish.
Yeah,
But I mean,
we all know who the Kings are.
Yeah, but
no one's under any illusions.
No, but I appreciate what you're doing with Goose, and also with Snarky Puppy. So
thank you. Yeah. Listen, my 3 favorite bands, and I have 3 podcasts.
Great.
So
love it.
One for each.
Yeah.
Well, that is all for this episode of We Move Through Stormy Weather. Thank you so much, everybody who has been listening, and we will see you next time.